What happens when worship turns into a business? A firestorm is erupting across the gospel and CCM world. And at the center of it are names like Kirk Franklin, Yolanda Adams, and Maverick City Music. Accusations of selling out for profit, losing spiritual authenticity, and turning Sunday praise into stadium profit. This isn't just music anymore. It's a battle for the soul of gospel itself. And trust me, what Yolanda Adams just said, it changed everything. The Christian music world is on fire. And no, we're not talking about a revival. We're talking about a growing divide that's rattling pews, pulpit platforms, and playlists. On one side, you've got CCM, contemporary Christian music, slick production, crossover appeal, and major corporate backing. On the other side, traditional gospel, raw, soulful, church-rooted music that's been the heartbeat of black worship for generations. And in the middle of this storm, Maverick City Music, Kirk Franklin, Yolanda Adams, and a host of worship leaders caught in a viral debate that's raising serious questions. Is gospel music being whitewashed for mainstream acceptance? Is CCM too profit-driven, losing the message in exchange for chart success? Are artists compromising their faith to sell records in the name of Jesus? The internet lit up after Yolanda Adams gave a brutally honest interview, questioning whether some modern worship music still serves God or the industry. That sparked a wave of reactions, including Maverick City's defense of their collaboration with Kirk Franklin and gospel fans accusing CCM artists of cultural appropriation and tokenizing black voices. And here's the kicker. The money involved in this worship war will blow your mind. In this deep dive, we're exposing the profit pipelines, the industry manipulation, and the theological compromises that many fans and even pastors are starting to call out. You won't believe what Maverick City's team had to say when they were confronted with accusations of watering down the gospel for ticket sales. And wait until you hear how Kirk Franklin clapped back. This is where it gets interesting. So sit tight, because we're unpacking the real tension between CCM and gospel. And it's more than just musical style. It's about identity, integrity, and influence. To understand the storm swirling around Maverick City, Kirk Franklin, and Yolanda Adams today, we first need to go back, way back to the roots of Christian music in America. See, gospel music and CCM weren't always on separate sides of the aisle. They both originated as musical expressions of faith, but they grew up in very different churches, cultures, and communities. Let's start with gospel. Born out of the black church experience in the early 20th century, gospel music was never just entertainment. It was ministry. It was birthed in pain, hope, resistance, and joy. Gospel wasn't just music sung in churches. It was a survival language for African American communities during segregation, racism, and social injustice. Pioneers like Thomas Dorsey, Mahalia Jackson, and later James Cleveland laid the foundation. Gospel was rooted in call and response worship, deep theology, and emotional spirit-led performance. It didn't need a record deal to be powerful. It just needed truth. Now, flip over to CCM, contemporary Christian music, which started gaining ground in the 1960s and 70s, primarily in white evangelical spaces. Artists like Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith, and Stephen Curtis Chapman introduced faith-based music with pop and rock influences, targeting radio audiences and suburban churches. CCM was clean, polished, and designed for mass consumption. Over time, these two genres built separate audiences, separate charts, and this is key, separate budgets. The money behind CCM became massive. Record labels like Capitol Christian Music Group and Provident Music Group, both under major corporate umbrellas, turned worship music into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Artists toured in megachurches, filled arenas, and topped Billboard charts, all while singing about Jesus. Meanwhile, gospel, despite its influence and unmatched vocal excellence, was often left underfunded, underpromoted, and undervalued. This divide wasn't just about style, it was about race, class, and access. Gospel artists often had to fight for visibility. Their music was labeled as urban or niche. Even though many CCM artists were heavily influenced by gospel sounds, some gospel artists were even discouraged from crossing over because labels feared their message or their blackness would alienate mainstream Christian audiences. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many black gospel artists saw their innovations and vocal stylings used by white CCM singers without credit collaboration or compensation. But that's not where it ends. In fact, this separation laid the groundwork for the tension we're seeing today. Fast forward to now. The rise of Maverick City music was supposed to bridge that gap, but instead, it exposed the fault lines even more. Why? Because when you combine the soulful intensity of gospel with the sleek branding of CCM, you get controversy, confusion, and yes, a whole lot of cash. And trust me, what happened when Maverick City teamed up with Kirk Franklin raised serious eyebrows. In the next section, we'll dive into the moment that reignited this cultural clash. Maverick City's explosive collaborations, the Yolanda Adams backlash, and the growing suspicion that gospel is being repackaged for profit. And wait until you hear what Yolanda really said about worship being turned into a business. When Maverick City music hit the scene in 2018, many in the Christian world thought they were witnessing a revolution, a beautiful spirit-led merging of worship styles that crossed cultural and racial lines. With their raw, unfiltered worship sessions, diverse backgrounds, and collaborations with both gospel and CCM artists, Maverick City positioned itself as the great unifier of modern worship music. Their early songs like Promises, Man of Your Word, Uncle, and Refiner weren't just viral hits. They felt authentic, deeply spiritual, and inclusive. They weren't overproduced, and that's what made them feel real. For many listeners, Maverick City brought heart back to worship. But here's where things took a turn. When Maverick City started collaborating with Kirk Franklin, it was marketed as a historic moment, a fusion of modern worship and classic gospel. Their joint project, Kingdom Book One, and the Kingdom Tour drew massive crowds and attention. People praised the energy, the message, the impact at first. Then came the criticism. Gospel traditionalists, including fans, artists, and church leaders, began asking tough questions. Is Maverick City watering down gospel to appeal to mainstream, white Christian audiences? Are collaborations with gospel legends like Kirk Franklin being used as credibility shields? Is worship being turned into a stage production for profit? And then Yolanda Adams, the gospel icon herself, added fuel to the fire in a viral podcast appearance. She didn't name names, but her words struck like thunder. If your worship experience looks more like a concert than a spiritual encounter, if you're more concerned about brand deals than broken hearts before God, then it's no longer ministry, it's marketing. Fans instantly speculated she was referring to Maverick City's massive tours, carefully curated social media content, and the increasing commercialization of Christian music. And while she later clarified she wasn't attacking anyone directly, the timing was impossible to ignore. It came just weeks after Maverick City had launched a new multi-million-dollar brand partnership with a mainstream agency. Then came the clapbacks. Kirk Franklin, never one to shy away from truth, responded in an Instagram Live. Excellence is not the enemy of worship. Just because we're organized doesn't mean we're fake. Just because we're successful doesn't mean we've sold out. He reminded fans that he, too, was once criticized by the gospel community when he first blended hip-hop with gospel in the unities. He called it the same old fear, just in new packaging. But the debate didn't stop there. Maverick City fans defended the group passionately, saying they were making worship accessible to younger generations and breaking racial boundaries. Critics fired back, arguing that accessible had become a code word for sanitized, whitewashed, and money-driven. Some pastors even took to the pulpit, warning their congregations about idolizing celebrity worship and confusing emotional moments with spiritual encounters. And then there was the TikTok theology drama. Clips of Maverick City worship leaders saying things that to many sounded more like self-help mantras than scripture. That's when the theological critique began. Are these worship leaders trained? Are they preaching truth or just vibes? At the center of all this tension lies a simple but painful question. Is the modern Christian music industry helping people encounter God or helping corporations make millions? In the next section, we'll peel back the curtain and follow the money. Who really profits from worship music? And why does gospel consistently get the short end of the financial stick? And what we found about streaming royalties, concert revenue, and label deals will shock you. Especially the part about how gospel artists get treated behind closed doors. Let's strip away the lights, the harmonies, and the hands in the air, and talk about what many don't want to admit. Worship music is big business, and like any business, there are winners and losers. While Maverick City Music and Kirk Franklin are at the center of the current cultural clash, the real battleground is money. Specifically, how money flows very differently through CCM, contemporary Christian music, and gospel music. So let's break it down. 1. The CCM profit machine. CCM is run like a well-oiled corporate empire. Major labels like Capitol Christian Music Group, owned by Universal Music Group, and Provident Music Group, owned by Sony, have multi-million-dollar infrastructures. They invest heavily in artists like Lauren Daigle, Chris Tomlin, Toby Mac, and Elevation Worship, placing their music in TV shows, commercials, movie trailers, and even Super Bowl promos. These artists get full-scale touring, support, radio play on hundreds of stations, nationwide, strategic merchandise, sales, billboard positioning, and playlist dominance on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon multi-realm income, publishing, licensing, brand deals, YouTube monetization, and sync placements. Here's the shocking part. Top CCM acts can earn millions per year, with stadium tours grossing up to $30 to $40 million annually. And where does most of that money come from? Not church folk, not Sunday morning tithers, but corporate sponsors, mainstream audiences, and very targeted marketing to white evangelical churches and youth groups. 2. The gospel music struggle. Now, contrast that with gospel. Despite its historical legacy and unmatched vocal artistry, gospel music has long been undervalued. Even within the Christian music industry itself, artists like Yolanda Adams, Tasha Cobbs Leonard, Donnie McClurkin, and Jonathan Makrin-Olds often don't receive the same marketing push or distribution reach as their CCM counterparts. Why? Because gospel, which is rooted in black church tradition, is often viewed by labels as limited market or ethnically niche. Gospel artists face fewer radio stations dedicated to gospel nationwide, lower streaming payouts due to being placed on smaller playlists, less touring support, unless they're paired with a CCM artist, being pushed into Sunday best type aesthetics, which keep them boxed in, even when gospel songs do chart. The artists often don't get the financial cut they deserve. Most operate under restrictive label contracts, and unless they've built their own production company, like Kirk Franklin or Fred Hammond, they see only a fraction of the rand. Get this. Several industry insiders have anonymously reported that gospel album budgets are often 1/5 to 1 the size of a CCM project. 3. Maverick City. Between worship and wealth. Now, here's where things get messy. Maverick City music started off as a grassroots movement. No labels, no industry polish, just raw worship. But as they blew up, they entered into partnerships with major labels, signed on with branding agencies, and launched merch lines and exclusive ticketed events. Fans were divided. Some applauded the growth. They're bringing gospel to the world. Others asked, at what cost? Maverick now has deals that include licensing, streaming partnerships, and brand extensions that rival CCM giants. While this has increased their reach, it's also raised uncomfortable questions. Are we commodifying sacred worship? Can you still call it ministry when it looks like a Netflix tour doc? Is Maverick still creating spontaneous worship? Or is it now strategically packaged spirituality? Even Kirk Franklin, in a recent interview, admitted, we're in a dangerous place where worship can be manipulated to sell product. The responsibility is on us to make sure it's still about the kingdom, not the clicks. 4. The hidden contracts and disparity. Behind closed doors, some gospel artists have begun speaking out off record about how they're being sidelined in favor of diverse faces that fit the CCM mold. One artist who wished to remain anonymous said, labels want our sound and soul, but not our stories or our struggle. They'll put a black voice on the track, but push it to a white singer with a broader appeal. Some even allege that gospel collaborations are carefully engineered, not for unity, but for expanding CCM market share into urban